All right. Oh gosh, my voice is loud. I love it. Good evening. How are you all?
Good evening.
Good. Thank you for being here. It is absolutely fabulous to be here and to see so many young people as well, like myself. I love it. So thank you for showing up tonight. I think that means a lot. It's super bright up here, so if I look at you weird, that is why. But my name is Amanda Kunchbahari, and I am with Hennepin County. And again, I'm very, very pleased to be here today. My talk is going to be a little more technical, and I will go through what trafficking is and what an exploitation as well, what Hennepin County is doing in regards to this issue, and tell you a little bit about what's happening on a statewide level related to Super Bowl planning as well. So it'll be a little different gear, but I'm hoping that you'll take away a lot from tonight. So what I'm going to talk to you about is Hennepin County's No Wrong Door initiative. And what I like to do is start out first by showing you what our definition is at Hennepin County for youth who've been sexually exploited. This kind of helps ground us in what we're talking about so that we're all working off of the same definition, and we're trying to be as inclusive as possible too, so we have included youth who identify as male, female, or transgender, and I think, being inclusive is something that we really strive for at the county and how we serve our youth. And to give you some background, who here, raise your hand if you're familiar with what Safe Harbor is. All right, so we got a couple of folks, that's great. So Safe Harbor was passed in 2011 in Minnesota, and essentially what Safe Harbor is saying is that youth who are being exploited or trafficked are seen as victims, not as criminals, and so in the past they were able to be criminally charged if they were being prostituted. Now we understand that youth are in need of protection and services. So we want to be able to provide that, especially as a county organization. We see that as our kind of call to duty, especially with the role of child protection. So this definition and this passage of law really kind of shape the way we understand this issue in Minnesota and how we respond to our youth, and now how we're also responding to our adults who are potentially victims of trafficking and exploitation. Then what happened when this was passed, so the Department of Public Safety and the Minnesota Department of Health and other agencies within Minnesota came together and decided that how do we make this operational? And they created a model called No Wrong Door, which is a statewide initiative, and essentially it's saying that we want to put into place support and services. So we do that through the form of housing, shelter, services for our youth that are trauma-informed, victim-centered, and evidence-based. And then Hennepin County, so we had a previous county commissioner who really understood that we have a role to play in serving our youth who are being exploited and wanted to create another response plan specific to Hennepin. And I don't know who lives in Hennepin County, but you all are here and we're in Hennepin County, and I work just a couple of blocks away at the government center. But you know that our community is very diverse and very, very expansive. So we want to make sure that we can respond appropriately to the diverse needs of our youth. And so Hennepin County also created a No Wrong Door plan, which gets a little confusing when I talk about it because people get them mixed up. But we have a response as well, and I'll walk you through what those components are of our actual plan. So in the plan, we have 6 different goals. And as you can see, it's really holistic, and I am very proud that we have that. So we're not just looking at how do we kind of prosecute perpetrators of trafficking and the buyers who purchase sex, but we're looking at how do we do prevention work as well. How do we serve our youth when they come into our system? How do we train folks like yourselves so that you understand what's happening, right? And how do you respond as well? How do we house our youth? Housing is such a critical issue, and so we want to make sure that we have the resources in place to do that. And with the prevention piece, I like to highlight that because that's really looking at how do we address systemic issues that allow this issue to be something that lives and thrives in our community, and really looks at how do we end this, right? And how do we put the supports in place for people so that they aren't buying sex and people aren't being victimized, right? And then we also look at housing again, and that's a key focus for us. We like to look at service delivery. So right now we have a couple of contracts with community providers, and one of them in particular, just to highlight, is an equine therapy. So we have a contract with a barn that's a little ways away from here, and they provide horse therapy to our youth. And it's been really successful, and it's something that we hope to continue to do, but as you can see, we're thinking outside the box. How do we provide intervention services and supportive services for healing, right, in different ways that are not the norm? And then prosecution and law enforcement. So the pastor spoke about this earlier. That is a huge component of what we do at the county with our criminal justice system, and wanting to make sure that if somebody is committing a crime, that they are being prosecuted in the way that's appropriate, right? And serving that time as well. I'd like to highlight this graph because it shows kind of the holistic nature of our work. So the No Wrong Door initiative is in the middle, right? And essentially we're working with all of the different lines of business, the different partners within Hennepin County even. So trying to make sure that we have a coordinated response of how we do this work. So our county board is invested in this. We have our county administration, we have the human services department, public health, because we see this as a public health issue. We have public safety and all of its components involved. And the courts have been a huge partner as well. A couple of deliverables that I like to highlight so that people know what we're actually doing. Besides the services that we have, I would say that we're probably one of the only counties that has dedicated social workers working with youth who've been exploited and or trafficked. So we got those staff, I would say about a year ago now, and they work specifically with youth who've been exploited or are at high risk of exploitation. We understand the complex nature of this issue and want to make sure that we have specific services and specialized staff that can meet the needs that they have. We also, I talked about the law enforcement prosecution piece. So we kind of modeled after our partners in Washington County and Ramsey County and looked at what they were doing because they were doing it very well. And we decided to get some funding through our county board. Thankfully, they approved it. For us to have a dedicated prosecutor to actually kind of prosecute these cases, right? We didn't have that necessarily. And so this person is specific in that role and they can become specialized in how they do it. And then we have a detective and investigator in the sheriff's office. They play a critical role in how we respond and wanting to make sure that we have the people and the support to look online, to look at those networks that are not street-based. It takes a lot of time to do that, and so those are the folks that are able to do it. And then looking at some of our strategies for the upcoming year and what we're working on right now. So we're looking at developing a training for our staff in Hennepin County. I really want to make sure that we all have a baseline understanding of what this issue is, and as county employees, how do we respond? And I think from there, we can continue to build in our knowledge, expertise, and education. We're also looking at what are the best practices. So we are going to commission some research with the University of Minnesota to start to understand how do we serve our youth who, because of their trauma, may be displaying behaviors that are aggressive or potentially violent. Oftentimes they get kicked out of shelter because their trauma is manifesting in those behaviors, and it is a safety risk for other people there. But we don't want to give up hope, right? I think that's a message that we heard clearly in the first speech. We want to be able to serve everybody and understand their level of humanity as well. And so by doing this research, we're going to be able to understand what are their needs. How do we hear it from their voices themselves instead of from our social workers or providers? We want to hear from our youth. We want to know what they need. And so this is a way to do that. We're also, again, looking at what is evidence-based. So how do we provide different services to our youth? The equine therapy has been successful, but it's not enough. And we also know, again, as the pastor said, boys are affected by this issue as well. And so as a state and as a county, we have a call to duty, and we want to make sure that we follow through on that. And right now, there is a gap. There is a gap statewide and in our county as well. So we're trying to figure out how do we meet their needs because they are being victimized also. And we're looking at what is our process internally. So when I talk about intake and assessment, as you see on here, that's an example would be, let's say somebody calls child protection and the reporting that something happened. What is our internal process to understand if this youth is being exploited or trafficked? Nobody's going to say to you, I'm being exploited or I'm being trafficked. That's not going to happen. And so how do we ask the right questions to understand what is happening in this person's life, right? In this young person's life, and are they at high risk? What are the vulnerabilities that they may have? Are they homeless? Are they living in poverty? And how do we meet their needs so that they don't then become trafficked or exploited? And then continuing trainings like this, we see great value in doing it, and so I'm happy to be here. And I think this is a way to get education out there to folks. And then one thing I'll talk about in a little bit is what's our Super Bowl response? And I'm sure, how many people have heard about Super Bowl and trafficking and all that stuff? Okay, mostly everybody in here, that's great. So we'll talk a little more about that. Right now, actually. I always forget that I have that right after this, but so Super Bowl 52 happening February 4th, 2018. So what's been happening so far? There are a lot of different efforts, so I don't want to say that this is the only one, but I can only speak to this one because this is the one that I know. Myself, John Choi with Ramsey County Attorney's Office, and a woman named Terry Williams from the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. The three of us have convened a committee, and we started the committee in July of 2016. So we've been organizing for over a year now, and now we're in the final stretch, right? Ready to implement what we've been planning. And since we put our committee together, I'm happy to say that it has grown kind of significantly. We have 40 plus organizations that are involved, and as you can see, we're representing most of the different sectors that are out there. Again, we want to be inclusive. And we have over 80 people, so it is growing, and it's really great that it is growing. Some of our key messages that I think are really important to highlight is sex trafficking is happening 365 days a year. And a little kind of backstory, when we started this committee, we heard a lot about, people would say sex trafficking really leads to a high increase, or is increased significantly during Super Bowls. And we wanted to know, is that true? And so we actually had the University of Minnesota, again, do some research for us, and they looked at ads placed online during large events. And what they found is that there is a slight uptick in the ads placed online, but it's not any greater or more significant than other large events. And I think that's really important to highlight because we don't want to play into the kind of exaggeration that happens during this time. But we want to use it as an opportunity to educate folks and to really get the truth out there about what this issue is and to get people committed to fighting this every day of the year and not just during that time. And that research is available, so I can leave you my contact info and I can send you that too if you're interested. And so I talked about the second point there, and we're also looking at how do we create a model that is replicable. So we've been putting in a lot of work, and we want to make sure that that is sustainable and that other cities and other communities can utilize that. So we are looking at being able to share that plan after this is done so that people don't start from square one, kind of like how we did. And then Minnesota is a national leader. I kind of laugh that I have this in here because it sounds like we're bragging, but we are actually doing really good work. And I know Source is here too and can probably attest to that as well, hopefully. But I do think we should be proud of the work that we have done so far. And some of our goals, I won't read all of them, but I think some key ones that we want to just to highlight is we want to offer enhanced services while also balancing that reality that we know that this is not the single largest event, right? And so how do we meet the needs of our community, but not kind of dump resources and not have it be sustainable? We're doing some public education campaigns that I'm excited to talk to you about because they're kind of launching. One has launched and one is going to be launching in a couple of days. So areas of focus. So during that time period of last year, we went through a lot of strategic planning. And what we came up with is this list of kind of areas of priority or focus. And from this, these are all now subcommittees that we have under the umbrella of this larger committee. And so I'll go through each one so that you know a little bit about what is actually happening. So our business partners, we want to engage the private community, right? The business sector. And they have been phenomenal partners in this work. And one of their main areas of focus is around fundraising. So the plan that we've developed costs money, and we've gotten some money, we've gotten some funding, but we have a gap also in what is needed to actually execute on it. And so their job is to do that. And one kind of cool way that they're doing it is creating a gift registry. So Mayo Clinic is kind of leading the charge on this, and it should be up, and you'll probably see ads in the Star Tribune and a video that will be coming out soon. So anybody in the general public can donate money or donate items in particular to our shelters. So specifically, as an example, the Link is an organization that we work with, and they have a shelter in Prior Lake called Passageways. And let's say they need items like clothing. So somebody would be able to donate the items, and it would go directly to that organization. So it's kind of neat, something different, and a different way of thinking about how we raise money and how we do fundraising in general. We have a service provider response. So the Link that I talked about, they are really leading this with a lot of other organizations on the ground who are doing this work. And those are some of their key areas of focus, but like I talked about, housing, making sure that we have street outreach workers during that time, especially that it's going to be cold outside when the Super Bowl is here. We want to make sure that we are able to encounter people that may be on the street and may need a place to go or may need, clothing or any other item. Then the communications committee. So these are the two kind of PSA campaigns that I was talking about. So these were started before we actually had the committee up and running. And we're really looking at, endorsing these two communication kind of PSAs. And so the first one is called I Am Priceless, and the Link has developed this. They have a youth advisory committee which is made up of different survivors, actually. And so they really drafted this, and it's really targeting girls who are from 8 to 14, actually, the age has increased a little bit. And just trying to get the message out there that I am priceless, right? And my body is not for sale. That's the other part of the slogan as well. So kind of that more preventative, early intervention phase. And so you'll see that on bus ads, like on actual buses, at bus stops. You might see a wrap around the light rail possibly too. And then you'll see there's gonna be a mural painted somewhere as well. The second one we have is Don't Buy It, and that is by Men as Peacemakers, which is an organization out in Duluth. And what we say, a lot of the folks who are doing the anti-trafficking work, is that this is a market-driven model, so it's really driven by the demand. And this kind of campaign is really focusing on ending the demand for sex. So how do we talk to men and boys about this issue? How do we talk about toxic masculinity and how those things play a part in this as well? And so they actually have a lot of curriculum that's available for free for anybody to access. So if any of you wanted to hold a class or do some education, that is available. I actually saw the commercial run this weekend, which was really cool to see that. So you may encounter it as well. We have a training subcommittee. We actually had a meeting today and really looking at how do we get the word out to the other sectors that may not have a level of familiarity around this issue. And so we're just planning around that, and hopefully we'll come up with a resource guide where we point people to where the trainings are available. We also want to develop a video for the general public so that we can educate folks again about what the issue is and how they can get involved and how they respond. So you'll see more about that as we go forward. And then some other areas too, we've been looking at what is our hotline response. And I'll say this, if you ever encounter something, what we typically say is that day one is a number that's out there, and that is our local response. And I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I can get it out there. And then the National Human Trafficking Hotline is also another resource. And as always, 911 is available too if you see something and don't know what to do. And so we want to get those messages out there and tie it with our communications piece. Faith-based community members, so that we have gotten a lot of interest from the faith-based community. And so Thrivent Financial is actually leading that committee, and they are looking at how do we engage with our faith-based partners, and how do we engage with partners who may not be of the Christian faith either. So wanting to be inclusive and engage other faith communities as well. So if anybody's interested in any of this work, let me know, and we'd love to get you involved in some way. We have a government partners one, so a unique opportunity to get our state partners and local partners involved and get the messages out. So we're looking at how do we, provide them with the materials to send to their constituencies too, so that people, again, are educated and aware about what's happening. And then a newly formed group is a child protection one, and they're looking at what is the response and responsibility from child protection on a statewide level. And we haven't done that before, but I think it's important because it's not just Hennepin County that's impacted, it is all of our other counties as well. And then if you want to get involved, you can always contact me directly, but we also have the Minnesota Girls Are Not for Sale site through the Women's Foundation. That's an initiative that's been around for a couple of years now, and they just renewed it to 2019. But on that website, we have information about other ways to get involved and more information about the campaigns that I talked about too. And that's my contact info. So my question for you is, what is something new that you have learned today from the talk that I gave, and how are you going to use that information? So, and I actually have to leave early, so I apologize, but feel free to contact me, and it was such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.